Okay, so next up we have um, you mentioned your reports are non-template. Can you share a few examples of such reports? Absolutely. So, oh God, what am I doing here? Um, okay, so basically, I'll show you like an old coverage tracker. And this is actually cool because I came across this just the other day when I was doing a case study, and I thought, wow, this is pretty cool. So this is for one of our old clients, Circle CI, and yeah, basically, we started working with them at the start of this chart. I mean, this was like a really long client, it was like 5 years. And you can see when we picked things up with them, they were getting just 12 articles in total. And by the end of a quarter of working with them, we were hitting 335. So, really, just like an astronomical increase. And I was kind of thinking, either for this case study or maybe just on different parts of the site, you know, we could visually showcase this. I mean, this is Google Docs or Google Sheets or whatever, so it's pretty ugly. And I don't know that like we need to showcase every one of these numbers, but just like as powerful as it is to kind of show up and to the right for like total coverage for a client, I think that's pretty cool. Even looking at like the total number of views for their coverage, they were getting something like 289,000 views, and at the end it was like 5 million in a quarter. So there's just some like pretty impressive charts and stuff that we could potentially integrate into case studies or onto the site, and some sort of interactive graph and kind of showing how things look. This is an old way that I used to basically track coverage. I don't currently use this for any of our clients, but you can just kind of see what we were tracking back then. We had total coverage, and then we like to break things down by like features or mentions, features being like an article dedicated to just covering that specific company, whereas a mention is like they might be mentioned alongside other competitors or in like a roundup or a listicle or ranking or something. So obviously features have more weight than mentions. So that's why kind of we break out both of those things. Pull through messaging is typically like if a client has something that they want to make sure is mentioned each time they have an article written about them, is that particular attribute or product being mentioned, and that we basically would just look at all the coverage and see how much of it is coming through. And so we're measuring that. Other stuff, we look at views, and so that would be just essentially like a different metric than impressions. Impressions is like, I mean, I guess like essentially what happens is there's all these tools that try to get to this number of a view. So they would take an estimate of like, here's how much traffic this website gets on any given day. They're going to be seeing this much traffic. And if we can assume this article was on the front page of this website, on average, it was there for 6 hours. So it probably got this much traffic. That is called the views. That is like not an exact science, but again, it's the closest thing that we can kind of approximate. So when we say coverage views just for features and coverage views broken out by mentions, that's what that number kind of gets to. Other things that we track for clients are like backlinks. So obviously super important for SEO, for generative optimization, for ranking high, for improving your site's domain authority. And then also like in general, if you were to average out all those backlinks that we just got, what is the domain authority of those backlinks? Anything above 30 is pretty good. 75, 77, very, very good. Like excellent. And then we also obviously measure like social media, like how many shares of that particular piece of coverage was on LinkedIn or X, Instagram, whatever. So So yeah, we track everything in like just a spreadsheet like this, and then we would throw it into some sort of, larger visual. This is nice because it's sort of, as you update things in real time here in sort of this side, it'll then pull through into this side, and then it's kind of like anytime anyone wants to grab a chart or a graph, it's always up to date and it's always there. Downside is it's kind of ugly and feels very like 1990s Excel, like just garbage design wise. But yeah, so we migrated away from this. I would show you what we're currently using for a client is something that looks closer to this. So what we would typically do for, clients today is we would most likely put together something that has a much better visual aesthetic. We're going to be measuring things a little bit differently as well. So, for example, for this particular company, they also are curious how their competitors are doing. So, whereas that previous example was just all about their own PR, this current client cares more about themselves and how they're measuring against maybe their biggest competitors. So we don't just pull our coverage when we do an analysis for them. We're pulling, three competitors alongside of them and then charting that. So if you can take a look at this is like another great example of just like how our impact is from almost like day one. We started working with them like right here. And if I'm being honest, like that number, if you were to draw like the realistic thing, that dot would be like right here when we started working with them. And then when we kicked off with just 1 month to go until the quarter closed, it just went like this, like boom. And then it's just gone insane. And if you look at the numbers, I mean, I think this is something like 98 and this is like 650. So just an insane change in total coverage. We're also going up against some pretty large competitors that even have even more coverage than that. But you can see where we started would be like down here, and we're already up to here. So within 2 quarters, we've just made basically a huge improvement. We're tracking like coverage volume over time. We're tracking also what is known as unique coverage. So like total coverage being like just everything under the moon, press releases, paid posts, sponsored posts, earned coverage, syndications of press releases, just anything where a brand is mentioned. We've got that number here. Then unique would be like stripping out all the duplicates in the syndication. For example, let's say we issue a press release and it gets syndicated 50 times onto 50 different websites. Well, in total covers, that'd be counted as 51. In unique, that'd be counted 1 time. So it's kind of trying to actually look closer at the actual unique pieces of coverage. And that's where we're charting that. And then one step further is known as organic. So that is like sometimes in the unique coverage, there might be things like sponsored posts, there might be things like content that is like associated with the client, like with the company who's like, writing it or something like that. Or it's a press release. We pull all of that stuff out. And when we try to look at organic, it would be like how many people not affiliated with the company in any way are writing, feature, mention anything, something about it without being prompted to do so or without having any sort of financial relationship. And then we chart that over time. And then on top of that, we break that down even one step further, which is basically to say that like, within that coverage, there's going to be like user generated content, and then there's going to be like high quality media content. So user generated being like self-publish websites where you can go sign up. Anyone can sign up, create a username and just start publishing like a blog or something, but for a community. And while that stuff is valuable, it's also not as valuable as like a media member saying, here's a list of the whatever platforms and stuff like that. So we then break it down into like when we first started working with them, all of their content was like user generated, kind of not like low quality, but not the best. and then here where we are today, 50-50. And this is about, when we look at our competitors, where we want to be. It's about 40% is higher quality. So the fact that we're 50% is great. But yeah, it took a little while to move us over into that range. And now that we're there, the goal is to stay there. So that is typically how we're doing these. And then what I'll do on top of this is like, I will then take this report and I will do like a 30-minute walkthrough on like kind of like everything we're seeing for clients. And yeah, again, I think there's stuff in here that we could potentially use for the website. Like, I'll share this report in the Slack channel. I'll share a link to that. Actually, I'll probably duplicate this, whatever, the thing I was just showing you with the old way of doing things, because even though that's not a pretty chart, it does show a ton of improvement. And I know that was like in some of the questions that were being asked of like, do you have any, I think one of them was like, do you have any cases where you are really proud of what you've done, or, really showcase the services that you have? I think it was like number 10. Like, yeah, I mean, we have so many cool things. I would say like, um, I would go through our case studies with you to answer number 10, but I'll do that in another Loom just so we can kind of keep things like very simple. Like, if you're just looking for the answer for this, you can watch this Loom. But in general, uh, I will share with you the old way of like how report looked, and I'll share with you like how kind of the new modern way of how our reports look. And yeah, hopefully this is helpful.